Hi, everyone. We're back with another episode of the Genesis Gems Podcast, and I have a wonderful guest today who was actually recommended to me by one of my team. And that is Dave Power from Power Creative. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Jenny. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably most podcast listeners have got no idea what day it is when we do these things, but
Yes,
I'm always happy on a Friday.
that's it. Well, you never know when it's Friday for that person, though, right? So let's
Correct,
celebrate
correct.
Friday.
Well, every day could be Friday if we really want it to be.
Yeah. Well, and if you set yourself up financially, which is what this is all about, right? Every day
Correct.
could be a Friday.
That's so true. So true. So, Dave, I'm so ecstatic that we've finally managed to get together and for you to join me on the podcast. I know you obviously through my associations and from working together, but I think it'd be really great for you to share a little bit about Dave Power and how Power Creative came about.
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, Power Creative was born out of a passion, really, passion-born business. So I worked for around 8 to 9 years as an event producer, and there was video as part of that in another organization. But growing up, I was always making videos. So really, I would do your sketch comedy at school and things like that just for fun, and it was an outlet. A little bit of community radio, and through those avenues, I ended up realizing that I was building content for people. But at the time, I didn't see it the way that we look at content today. But they were the early beginnings. Eventually, I did a bit of training in events and hospitality, and that's where I led into the event production world. Didn't really like serving people at cafes, but liked the idea of running an event and producing all the technical because I had that technical interest. So essentially, I've got that background of, being able to call a show and run an awards night or an incentive, sales event or launch, but also the ability to understand the concept of what content goes into those sort of premises and how people are taking in the message. Power Creative really came about because of the growth online with video content. And even though events are still relevant, the growth for people needing content in their own business and having their own channel, becoming their own media outlet in a way, as we see today, I could see that growth. So from around 2011 onwards, Power Creative came about, and here we are today.
Wow. I have always had a really big passion for video. I'm not terribly good at always making sure that I do video, but I can really understand the power of video. So I want to, I guess, as a result of the work we've done together, but also having looked at a lot of your work, I want to sort of um, I guess, do a deeper dive into the power of visuals and like leveraging video in your marketing. And I think that's really why we're here today. I think we need to understand that the world is consuming information in a very different way to what it did 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So I think video is still a very powerful piece in your marketing toolkit. So let's discuss the importance of video in marketing. What's your take on it?
Definitely. Well, and over those years that I mentioned in my, I guess, journey of Power Creative and becoming the producer that I am today, I've seen all those iterations from, you know, whether it be people creating your basic corporate video, which used to be the most common thing that you'd keep on a DVD somewhere and maybe, occasionally send to a customer. And it was interesting in those days, I'm talking pre 2009 or 10, that was what you did. It wasn't really uploading to the internet. It was very much, on tape, on disc. And it was only really the high-end companies that would be creating that content. And what we've seen with social media and the rise of video content, it's grown exponentially. And I think there's always been this sort of fine balance of what is good content to put out there. And I don't think that ever really sits and just stagnates. I think it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And so, as a business owner in this space in creative, I'm constantly changing with it and moving with the times as the times change. And you may have some of your traditional methods always there as general practice, but it is about keeping up with how consumers are taking it in, and what's going to resonate for the viewer.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, it's so interesting actually that you say that. I was doing, having a cup of tea this morning and doing the Instagram scroll, just to, I guess see what was happening in the world overnight. And I came across this post where it was quite interesting where, a social media manager was talking about the fact that when she first started in marketing, that many of the different social media platforms didn't even exist, and
Mm,
so she has had to continuously iterate her well, even her job title,
yeah,
and how she delivers her services. And that would really also impact you because as you say, the type of video that was around maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago, is very different to what we're seeing today, even
mm,
from that corporate video style to the video, the videos that are being produced. Would
yeah.
you that's obviously something you've got to stay abreast of.
100%. And it's also, compare the days of popping a DVD in the player in the corporate boardroom where everyone's attention is there, right? And it's different to someone being on their phone in between a million other things in their life that they're doing and grabbing their attention with something that resonates. And that generation of who's viewing and talking their tone and their language and all that sort of thing is so crucial. You can't suit everyone, but that's why you need various content that talks to all the different types of customers and the profiles that suit.
Yeah, so I suppose one of the things there is, obviously video is all about creating to engage.
Mm,
And video, I mean, we the phrase, a picture tells a thousand, a thousand words. Um, Video is obviously another level again. And I'm
mm.
just wondering, what are these some of the essential elements to creating that type of video?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really understanding who the viewer is, and that's where I usually start, because if you know that and you know a little bit more about your objectives in who you're trying to reach and what the message is, that's really your ingredients to start piecing together some potential approaches.
Hmm.
And for me, I never really, even though I've got a lot of familiar approaches from previous projects that I could apply to the next client, I prefer to go in with not a completely blank page, but at least a skeleton that we can move around, and look at what is applicable to
Mm.
that particular brief and that particular goal. So there's so many approaches. And one thing that I often do say is whether or not the individual wants to be on camera like you and I are right here. And sometimes that's not right for everybody.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not their thing. And it's not so much just about fear of being in front of camera. It's just whether or not it's applicable in their role. Maybe they've got a comms manager, or maybe they've got a marketing manager or somebody else in the business that could play the role of the communicator, but it doesn't always have to be the business owner. So, and depending on what the subject matter is, if it's internal content or external content, and when I say that, I'm doing a piece at the moment with a bank that I can't name, but the bank is needing to, you know, they've just merged with another organization and they need to educate 1,500 staff. Now,
Wow.
you're not going to get that message from the CEO about that. You're going to get it from the operation team on the ground who know the policy and procedure inside and out. And you need to put that script together in a way that's going to resonate with people, but also not going to be a boring PDF. And what better way to do that than to have people speak for 2 to 3 minutes and break it into 6 subjects? And there you go. You've got that on your intranet. That's a resource. All the team now know where to go and what to do in these situations. And that's the sort of thing where not every brief is the same, because if someone's looking at an outside communication tool rather than an internal training tool, then there's a different approach and there's a different tone and language and people involved in it that need to speak to that audience. So it's very important to identify audience.
Yeah, I actually think that's really that's so true. I mean, the whole thing about marketing is creating a positive experience for the,
Mm,
for the people you want to do business with.
yeah.
And that can form, in many ways, obviously from, the first moment they see a brand to, to picking up a flyer to an email communication to watching a video. And I guess what better way to do that than through video, because it creates an emotional engagement at perhaps a higher level than anything else can.
That's right. And if you think about the subject matter of policy and procedure, it's fairly dry, right? So the
Mm,
alternative of a PDF black and white document that has very little imagery that relates to the viewer, compared to what we're doing here, where there will be overlay to, analogies and references about sporting analogies or whatever other analogies are applicable to that situation. It just changes the way people take it in. And if I wind my clock back to my event producing days, whenever we did content on stage at a conference for a sales team, the same thing applies. If you're
mm,
training a team on KPIs and all the other things, you can go in there military and be really hard about it, or you can have a bit more fun and creative with it and actually come in with a theme that matches the event and matches the training tool that makes everyone walk away on, a totally different note and absorbing everything that they've just learned. So
yeah,
I think that's where I find, I'm quite thankful that I've had the event background to apply to content,
yeah.
because it helps you think a little bit differently than, say, a person that's come out of film and television school and they've got all those traditional methods of, how things are meant to run in the world of production, but they don't necessarily always think outside the box. So yeah, for me, I'm always thinking, all right, well, what's going to suit this situation for this client, and how can we apply it to the strategy?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people don't realize is that, because we've been trained like monkeys to use our phones to do everything, and, shooting a 30, 10 or 30 or, second video in your backyard or out on the street when you're out socializing is very different to creating the types of videos we're talking about. It's quite a creative process. So I wanted to chat to you a little bit about sort of the team, the tools, the technical, the stuff that really brings this whole thing to life. So let's talk about team, because really it's, whilst I know it can look like it's a one-man band, often it's not. So share with me a little bit about the type of A team you would have when you're doing a video shoot.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about, roles and responsibilities. You can for sure go in with a one-man band in certain situations if the expectation of output isn't so high. But when you are expecting a certain polish and a certain look, and there's a lot of moving parts for everyone to have a role, then that's where you need to bring that team together.
Mhm.
And the difference would be things like bringing in your script writer, media trainer, who you would have met recently. I've worked with the lovely Christine Hurd for many years.
Yeah.
I know a lot of great media trainers in that sphere of getting someone comfortable on camera so that they don't trip up on themselves in the process of the record. And it is one of the biggest challenges. Forget all the technical, forget what camera, forget what light. It's all about how do you make that person feel comfortable in themselves
Yep.
in speaking to a robot, basically,
Yeah.
about who they are and what they do. It's not natural for most people. And, you really need, right now, I've got you as my media trainer telling me, ahead of this conversation, what we're going to be talking about today. You've prepped me.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have that on the day and you have just the camera operator who's so focused on the shot, the light, the audio,
Yeah.
and hitting record. Now, if that person's distracted for 1 second about what you're talking about, one thing's going to suffer. You can't possibly multitask all of that.
Mm.
You can try, but it could go wrong. So for me, I bring the team that makes sense to the subject matter that's required. And obviously, this comes down to budget. Budget's not always there for everybody. Sometimes there's an internal person that can play that role. And in an organization where they've already got a comms manager or somebody like that, maybe the comms manager can help them. And that's fine, particularly if they need to be, ironing out specifics around what subject matter is covered and, terminology and things that they can or can't say that my media trainer wouldn't know about.
Yeah.
But even then, there's a world where they can both work together as well. And the comms person can work with the media trainer, come together. One's looking at the finite detail of subject matter. The other one's looking at body language and personality and tone and speed and all the rest. But yeah, beyond that, it's really just about what is the shot, how is it shot, what team is required for getting those shots. And that will be various approaches depending on how complex the shoot is. And I don't want to bore your viewers too much with all those different roles, but if you go and look at the credits of any movie, you can see how many roles are possible. Not to say that all of my work is going to be at that end. Usually there's at least a team of 2 to maybe 5 or 6 operators, depending on how heavy that content is.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously that, as you say, it is frequently according to budget. But and also I think too, just how, as you say, how comfortable the subject or the person, the individual or team is in front of the camera, because that can
Yeah.
make such a difference, can't it?
And the other thing that we haven't mentioned is hair and makeup. Often
Oh, yes.
someone, they know their own hair and makeup, sure, that's fine. However, if they don't know how to apply hair and makeup that suits this sort of lighting for camera, not that I have any today, but if someone doesn't know that and they over apply or apply the wrong tone or any of that stuff, right, that could ruin the shot, unbeknownst to that poor makeup artist who hasn't necessarily done things for camera before. So
Yeah.
it's very important to assess. We've got a lot of different contractors that we work in the makeup world who do everything from film and telly to wedding makeup. But what they do for a wedding versus what they do for film and telly are 2 different worlds.
Yeah.
And you've got to make it sort of not overdone and all that sort of thing. But they also check for consistency throughout the shoot, so that if someone's, fatigued, or if something's happening with, what they've applied, they can reapply in between takes. And it's really important. Doesn't add a silly amount to the budget either. I'd highly recommend it for most clients.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to pick up on that in a moment's time. I
Yeah.
do want to talk to you about tools. I mean, you've
Mm.
obviously been working in this sphere for quite a long time, and you would have had to have seen so much advancement in the equipment, in the gear that as a videographer and that you have to take. I am constantly shocked at how much gear you guys have.
Yeah. It's a battle.
And the unique way that you bring your gear to set. So,
I've worked
so
out the wheels now. Yeah.
yeah, so share with us a little bit about the tools.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is where, depending on how big the team is, that equipment list can only grow. So for me personally, not talking about any other crew, my car is chockers, and I've I don't want to jump too much into the world of cars here, but I've jumped from a 7-seater to a 5-seater because I wanted to go electric, and there weren't any 7-seaters available. So I've gone into a 5-seater. It is more of a wagon shape electric, but the thing is, it's not quite as big as what that 7-seater was. So I've definitely got a lot of gear that I lug. But the alternative is roof racks, and I've got a little tow bar rack that you referred to earlier that I also attach wheels to. So when I take the tow bar rack off, I can wheel all the equipment into the chute. So yeah, for me, not everyone would do it that way. A lot of operators would go and get a van, or they'd drive around in a ute or something like that. But I just had this personal preference that I'd go for something that I feel is a lot better for the environment, but also it's quite comfortable to drive compared to being up in a bumpy old van. So it feels more like you're in a car. But in terms of the equipment that we're carrying, you've got everything from multiple cameras. I never carry one. I've always got at least 4 to 5 cameras, your drone, your audio equipment. Right now, what we're set up with is a auto cue so that I can look at you and not look away to the monitor. I usually carry the auto cue because it's quite a necessary tool these days.
Yeah.
Interestingly, on the auto cue, I used to have to bring in an auto cue operator. Occasionally, I still do, particularly when someone needs to keep speed on the dialogue and change it regularly, specifically in a live event environment. It's very important to have a dedicated auto cue operator for those things. But the old iPad auto cue is quite handy just to have as a tool alongside the equipment that I use for situations where I am a one-man band and I don't have the budget to go and get that auto cue operator, just to help people get the message very simply to camera without needing all the extra assistance of the media trainer. But yeah, there's a lot of equipment. So I'd say in kilograms, 500 kilograms worth of equipment.
Oh my gosh.
So it's quite a lot. And you do see that the car sits a little bit lower as you put it all in. And yeah, it's good fun. It's certainly a workout in terms of constantly moving. I do need to work on myself a little bit whenever I, go see the chiro or the physio or the massage to get that sorted, because it's pretty hard going on the back.
I was going to say, you'd have to actually keep a level of fitness to be able to carry that stuff.
Which is why I'm obsessed with wheels when I talk about putting things on trolleys or inside of that cargo box that I mentioned, because if you can, from a safe work point of view, actually on that, I'm going to a safe work workshop next week for this reason.
Yeah.
It's important to work safely, not only for me personally and my business, but it's important, I think, for my clients to know that I am working safely, because they've got a certain level of liability in a way there as well. And if we're all working on similar practices, then it makes sense. But more importantly for me, it's like I don't want to sore back after every single shoot.
Yes, and let's face it, the longer we have our businesses, the older we're all getting. So we do have to look after ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. And I could stop doing it and just get someone else to do it, but I love it so much. So
no. Don't do that.
I don't think I want to just sit there and direct and tell people to set up things. I like actually doing it, so it's good.
I wanted to chat about the technical. So, we've mentioned all the different types, short form, long form videos and things like that. But, the editing process is extremely important. And you touched on the whole hair and makeup thing and keeping that consistency throughout. What I don't think a lot of people realize is just how much footage goes into something that may end up being 3 or 4 minutes long, and I feel like that's where the technical, your prowess, so to speak, really comes in. So let's chat about that, how important is that editing process, that moment where all the work, all that pre-work you've done now comes to life and in that end product?
Definitely. And I think when it comes to cutting content together, it's also a case of what stage do you go through first before you see the finished product of the 2 to 3 minutes that has all the lovely polish and cutaway shots. And for those who aren't sure what a cutaway shot is, right now, Jenny and I are talking about this, and we could see a picture on top of what we're saying, and you won't see our faces. we're talking about a subject matter, and I might mention microphones and cameras, and you'll see shots of microphones and cameras. That's a cutaway. So I think the idea is, before you get carried away about the cutaway, what needs to happen is really understand what the storyline is in the edit before you build the cutaway. And for us, it's really important to make sure that the narrative has a flow to it that matches what the story is. So let's say, for example, we're talking to the business owner, we're talking to the customer, and maybe some staff about what it is that's been done in their business. In interviews, you might have 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the business owner, another 20, 30 minutes of the customer, and then you might have 10, 15 minutes of staff talking heads, interview style like this. And the thing is, there's a lot of waffle in there. There's a lot of mistakes in there. There's a lot of bloopers. We know all about the bloopers, right? And the thing is, you need to pick the best take. And sometimes you don't need to think too much about how they look in the take, because you're going to put cutaways on it. It's actually more about how convincing they sound. So audio is my general preference there. But there's also opinions, right? So I'll put together a draft there and say, here's what I think works. Before I go heavy on to the cutaways, I'll then let the client have some feedback there. If there's any feedback about the storyline and the subject matter, then we go and cull or reshape. And really, I treat that like the foundations of the home. If you don't have the foundations, you can't build the home. So you need to have the storyline.
Yeah. I think, obviously with having a well-written script to start with, obviously that is the big picture piece, but without really your prowess in the editing suite and being able to advise on,
Yeah.
those cutaways versus, no, this is appropriate to have that head on, that talking head. I think,
Yeah.
you certainly wouldn't have the impact that I think most videos are trying to achieve. So don't undersell your skill set.
Thank you. And I think also, like, when it comes to scripts, it depends on the type of video that you're doing. If you're doing something directly to camera with a teleprompter, it's 100% script. If you're doing something that's a little bit more organic and conversational, like what we're doing here today, then what we're doing is selecting our favorite parts of the conversation. We're not necessarily incorporating everything that was spoken about. And
I'm
it's
not sure about
important.
that. I haven't seen anything I want to edit out yet.
Not my bit about electric cars. That might really diversify your viewers a little bit.
All
But yeah,
good.
I think, it's one of those things that that's all established in the brief. We work it out and we say, okay, it's going to be verbatim per the script, or it's going to be more candid. Let's go this way or that way. And then with all that in mind, at the day of the shoot, that's all part of the process. And then we know how we're going to edit from there. And sometimes, if we have a storyboard that very clearly states exactly what needs to go where and what the shots are that we're talking about, that's fine. But there's other times where you might think that looked good at the first idea, but now that you've seen it in light, actually, we prefer to flip it the other way. So I think for me, it's always about remaining flexible and not necessarily being stubborn about anything, and just moving with the process.
Yeah. I think the one of the things though, around video, using video in your marketing and in your overarching strategies is that, it has so much potential, particularly with brand awareness and brand building. But customer retention, as you've been, team building or team communication, lead generation, things like that. I think it has so much power. I mean, from a brand, as someone who is so in love with brand marketing. I think it's such a powerful tool to be able to tell your story. Let's talk about the trends and innovations that you've seen over recent times. I mean, video in itself has been around quite a while, as you've said, but there are some changes that we're seeing, and certainly the application of video, we're seeing more of it. What are you noticing?
I think in that process of culling and how long I spend personally culling, sometimes it's nice to actually run an AI filter. And I
Hmm.
know a lot of people want to run away from AI filters, but actually I treat it more like an assistant editor. And instead of replacing me and feeling threatened, I just use it to my advantage to see exactly how, that could potentially take shape. And especially when we're talking about the candid piece. And if we ran our podcast right now through a filter and said, what are the best hooks? It would tell us and it would
Yeah.
spit out 30-second, 90-second, or 10-minute, or whatever variation of time you want, in vertical or wide format. So tell me, why would you spend the time and the money editing that if you can do it with an AI, but then perfect it with some polish and then
Mm.
spend the money on that? And that's
Yeah.
the way I look at it, particularly when it comes to not only some of the client's content, but definitely my content. Because if I'm creating and building assets in my library, I don't want to be distracted doing that and not working on my client's work.
Mm.
So it's important to speed up the process for me as a business for my own marketing. But
Mm.
in someone else's marketing, it's also quite a cost benefit there as well for them to get more efficiency and speed in the process. And I think that's one of the points that I focus on a lot in the business as the world changes: speed and efficiency and quality, and there needs to be a match.
And I think it makes it more, and viable for people that perhaps couldn't consider video, particularly the quality of video that you're producing before. I think, in the past it would just, as you say, it would be, well, look, this is like producing a movie for the business, and we just don't have the budget for that. Whereas I think now, with the advancements in the tech, and in the advancements in the software and things like that, and things like AI, I think it concertinas down, a lot of the input that you have to have, and allows you to do more for the people that you actually want to do business with.
Yeah, and I think it's also concentrating the skills that you can apply in how that's driven. Because we all know rubbish in is rubbish out. So if you give the AI rubbish, it's going to publish rubbish. But if
Yeah.
you've got a creative head that's controlling that, that knows the quality that they are after, you're the quality controller by doing that.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's important to understand the difference between the two.
I know we haven't talked a great deal about, lengths of videos and things like that, but I kind of want to loop that into some common pitfalls that you see people make, because I do think sometimes some of the common pitfalls are that, you know, people make the videos too long or too short, not too often too short, but often too long. So
Yeah.
what are, some of the common pitfalls that think people should really be avoiding?
And I think on that, it's really about segmenting things into subjects. The more we put into one video, the longer it becomes. It does become a documentary. And that might be suitable in certain situations if you're doing an Australian story type of project where it's a sit down, long look at something. But if
Mhm.
you're a business and you're wanting people to understand more about you, you want to segment that and you want to make it as pain free as possible for the viewer, but also selective for the viewer about what is their interest. So if you segment your video into those various areas, then the person can skip to the thing that's relevant to them. They already know about your history, or they already know about another aspect in your business. They don't know about this other thing, and you've highlighted that over here.
Mm.
So it's really about building a library of content and not just one that suits all.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I do think one of the other, I guess, as someone, as a marketer and working with quite a variety of clients over many, many years, and even my advertising days when I used to do a lot of video back then, um, you know, a lot of the time they weren't quite willing to take the advice of having the right team around them. Like, it is such a different experience being put in front of a camera, and suddenly, your brain goes blank and those words don't flow. So I think you've got to be willing to take the advice and actually lean into the process, don't you think?
Oh, definitely, definitely. But also that comes back to the point of whether or not people want to be in front of the camera, you know.
Yes.
It's not the one solution, it's a solution of one of many. And an example recently is someone wanted to demonstrate a product, and there's no dialogue in this. It's more a walkthrough product demonstration. But there was no way they wanted to get their own staff to demonstrate that. Now,
Mm,
you could do it if you really wanted your sales reps go and demonstrate that thing, but they didn't want to make it a sales video either. They didn't kind of want to go, and here's how the washing machine works and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't really a instructional video. It was more of a product benefit sort of feature
yeah.
video. And for their example, it's better to showcase the product with paid talent demonstrating how that product works by just using the product in its everyday environment and not becoming a host and a Wheel of Fortune type of here it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, that's the thing that speaks to customers as well. If you can just show real life environments, quite often it's appealing to people because it's not forced advertising on them.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, that's down to format and duration as well. And in those ones, they're happy to spend 3 to 4 minutes of showcasing these products in use, but they'll have their social cut downs that are 10 to 15 seconds long of just that one feature, as opposed to every feature on the product. And that's where it helps in knowing the format and thinking about it. But coming back to your point about comfort level, don't put yourself in the firing line if you think there's another solution that's a better fit.
Well said. Well said. I do think also it's knowing why you're doing it.
Yeah,
Very, very first place.
yeah,
A common mistake is like, oh, I saw so and so's done a new video. I think I should do one too, the whole FOMO thing. And I do think it's like, well, that's fine, but what's the purpose? Why are we doing it? And then creating, you know, you can't just suddenly sit down and let's do a video. you know it's
yeah,
it's what's that briefing process that you mentioned earlier on. Like,
yeah.
if a common mistake is not having a really good brief and understanding why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, if you just jump from idea to idea, unfortunately, there's a big risk of things going wrong. And you're better off just shelving it, putting it off for a plan, and making sure that, we execute things the best way possible. Otherwise, you literally are throwing money out the window. And I think for me as well, that's one thing I point out to anyone that is a prospective client, that I'm not a closer. I do not try and close anybody on a sale, because it's all about building up plans. But also for them, it's about understanding scope and budget and what they need to plan. And you can't know that just without having conversations. Something I have done recently for my own website is have some basic models on the plan, but not necessarily, a drive away price. It's not
Yeah,
it's not the final figure. It's just a starting point so that people can see, here's a more simplistic approach, here's a more complex approach,
which
and
I
there's some
guess.
budgets.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, often one of the first conversations with clients is, look, I think this is where video can do a lot more than anything else in your toolkit.
Mm,
And let's start talking. Let's start the conversation. And the first thing they'll say is, "Well, what's the budget?" And we'll say, "Well, hang on a second.
yeah.
Let's talk about what do we want the video to achieve? How long do we want the video? Who do we want involved in it? And then we know what a budget could look like." I think unfortunately sometimes they feel like the budget predetermines what's going
Yeah.
to happen.
But also return on investment is important there. If you
Yeah,
know that your
yeah. Good
viewers,
point.
you turn over X amount of viewers and you convert however many, well, look at that as a cost benefit, really. And if that video didn't exist, they wouldn't be there. So it's really about understanding all those points that you're making, but also, you know, the more, not to say that you have to spend millions of dollars on video, but you do have to think carefully about not undercooking a project that could have really got a good result if you had just had a bit more planning around it.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that video has a longevity that often many other marketing tools don't. And and as I said, I'm a brand marketer from way back, and there's just nothing that tells a story quite like video does. So let's talk about some of your hidden gems. After all, this is the Genesis Gems podcast. And Dave, I've had so many lovely conversations with you. I know you've got lots of gems. So why don't you share with us some tips that, if I'm embarking on, doing a video, working with a videographer for the first time, what are some things that, I need to be aware of? And is there a story you can share with us?
Definitely. I think if people can work out exactly what the point of the content is, that's the best place to start, really. So whether that's an online piece or if they're planning some sort of launch or if they've got an event coming up, it's about setting some timelines, and then understanding, who they need to bring to the table in that. And the other thing that I've seen quite a lot is sometimes people will email briefs out to people without really any context and feedback. And so, unfortunately, what you get with that is just a cost comparison with no understanding of quality and deliverable.
Mm.
And it's important not to scattergun those quotes out, because I think people having that mindset, I'm buying a washing machine, I'm buying a fridge, I just want to pick up the cheapest product. It's not necessarily, some people it's about quality, but a lot of time it's just about price point for those
Mhm.
products. Video is a little bit different because you really need to understand all of the different parts inside of it. And this one, I keep going to use product analogies of cars and washing machines for some reason today. This one doesn't come with a 7-year warranty, unfortunately. So if you don't plan it, that's on you, right? Now, we'll try our best to provide solutions for the client, but if it's about a race to the bottom dollar, you're going to get what you pay for, really. So consult your producer, consult the production company, make sure that you're understanding what it is that you're actually asking for. And look, it's a bit of an unknown world for a lot of people. So I'm not expecting everyone to know this, but I think if you don't engage with them and have some feedback about what could be optioned in or out of their plan, then you come to a better result basically with whoever you choose. It's much better than just scattergunning out emails and just going with whatever random choice you go with on the day, I think.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I think probably the as a thought from myself is that know that you've got a good rapport with the team that you're working with, because
Yeah.
you're making a big investment, and I guess we have spoken about budget, but at the end of the day it's an investment in time and creative, in a lot energy, a whole heap of things. But
Mm,
if having a good rapport with the team that you're working with is extremely important, because it will help in the process, but it will also translate through the lens.
that's right.
And I think that, and it should, whilst, it's not necessarily a comfortable experience for everybody. Those people that are naturally comfortable in front of the camera, it is, but obviously it's not for everyone. And I think that's the other thing, is that by having a good rapport with your team and feeling comfortable with the team that you've got on set on the day, means that you are going to get a better outcome, and it's fun.
Definitely.
It should be fun.
Yeah. And people do take it quite seriously. And I think that's nerves and it's all those natural things that happen to us when we're under pressure. A little bit like going to the dentist with my 9-year-old. She overthinks it before she goes in, whereas my 6-year-old does not care 1 second about what's happening. It's a mindset. You got to shift your mindset and just move with it and understand that you're in good hands.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. Dave Power, you're an absolute gem. I Have really loved having a chat with you and sharing really, I guess, just a really powerful resource, tool, whatever you want to call it, that I think people should be embracing a little bit more. I think, obviously, we went through a tough time particularly in marketing and certainly with video during COVID times, but I think we're seeing more and more quality video arising again, which is what we really want, isn't it?
Definitely. And thank you so much for everything that you've done with me as well in the process. And it's so nice actually to work with someone that understands the whole marketing process, and as a consultant to your businesses that you work with, it's just really a pleasure to have someone like you be the conduit and the communicator that is often one of the struggles that comes about when I'm working directly with a business owner. Not to say we can't do it, but it's a lot easier when there's someone that's already given that background and holistic view to the marketing strategy beyond video into all the other areas as well. So thanks for everything that you do.
Thank you, Dave. That's really lovely of you. It's been really fun working together again. So, how can listeners learn more about Power Creative?
Yeah, sure. Head on over to powercreative.com.au. All the socials are covered as well. If you head on over to the website, they're all linked in there. I mentioned LinkedIn just by accident there, but I meant linked in.
Great segue.
Yeah. I do a lot of behind the scenes as well. So you'll see a behind the scenes of today. And if anyone ever wants to understand more about background and scope and all those ideas, that's all on the website. If you head to process and tips page, as well as those scoping and pricing model ideas that are all outlined as well.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I keep include all the links in the show notes so that everyone can easily access them. I think the one thing that I encourage everyone to do is if you've even just thought about it, just for a moment, just jump over to Dave's website, which he mentioned, and as I said, I'll include the link. Because there's so much there, and all the different types of videos that Dave has done over the years for varying businesses in so many different fields and industries. It just helps you understand how you can take sometimes a very complex message and make it very, very simple for the end users. So I do encourage you to visit the website. Do encourage you to check out his online profiles, because honestly, sometimes you're my entertainment. So
I think
I'm just going
sometimes
to say that
I feel like I'm entertaining myself a lot of the time, but yeah, I'm glad you're appreciating it.
I just love it. I'm like, oh, what's happening in the world? Oh gosh, Dave's got a new video out. Cool.
Dave's making bad dad jokes again, and it's a Friday. Here we go.
That's okay. That's what it's all about. But look, thank you so much, Dave, and I can't wait to chat to you again soon.
Thanks, Jenny. Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to follow me, Jenny Pierce, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, wherever you enjoy joining the conversation. Can't wait to connect with you. I'm looking forward to sharing some more Genesis Gems with you in the next session of Financial Marketing Secrets. See you then.